Alright, welcome to a brand new series on the channel. It is basically Sorare buy or buy, whether we want to go out and buy the player or whether we want to go and say goodbye to the player, cash in on the best opportunity you might have. This is going to be a little kind of financial evaluation mixed with some, football evaluation just to see what I think on a player. So I hope you like it. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments down below. And we're going to be starting with Bart Verbruggen you see on screen here. So it's a very interesting time to talk about Bart because he's just moved up almost 100% in value. He's basically more than doubled. And a lot of players on Sorare are like, I bought him for £100, can sell him for £200. Let's lock in that win and just be happy with it. And that's never the kind of attitude I've had with it. With any financial asset, you need to evaluate, is this going to continue for the long term? Am I selling too early? Because ultimately you don't want to sell your winners too soon and hold your losses. So looking at his price, he started at £93 a couple of days ago and he's up to 269, 258 in and about that region, and it's all become of basically really strong links to being a starting goalkeeper. So currently he's been on the bench for Anderlecht for most of last season. I think he played one game or two games towards the end of the season. But now he's linked heavily on Twitter and everywhere else to basically being a starting goalkeeper, or having a chance to be a starting goalkeeper at Burnley, I should say. Why that's interesting is obviously that Burnley are in the Championship now, so what that would mean is you'd have, I think it's 42 games a season, which is absolutely massive. He'd be an under-23 starting goalkeeper who's only 19, so he's got so many years of utility, and basically the new manager of Burnley is Vincent Kompany, who has a really respects him as a goalkeeper, so that's obviously why he's trying to make him one of the big signings. And in terms of just the signing in general, it makes sense for Burnley, where they've just got rid of two of their goalkeepers. They need someone to come in, freshen up the pile, and one of the best young talents in goalkeeping is probably a good selection for them. So then when you've got to evaluate a player, I guess you've got to look at what are the alternatives for what you're paying. And, being a Challenger Europe goalkeeper, this is what I'm kind of looking at. So top end, you've got Diogo Costa, and then kind of bottom end, you've got people that aren't really playing and, a lot of speculation on whether they'll be playing or whether they're just having a couple of games. But you can see Bart is right in the middle here at 0.201 ETH, about £250 basically. And for me, that is reasonable because of his long-term upside. Obviously, being such a good goalkeeper, he's in the under-21 Netherlands team. That could, in the long term, stretch out to be fantastic. In these evaluations, I'm going to try and keep it to a year and a half to 2 years sort of evaluation on how quickly can you get your money back. Will it be, a depreciating asset? Will it be an appreciation asset, obviously, where it's going up in value in time? So that's going to be crucial for the evaluation stage. And then what I'm going to be looking at is, what kind of players can you compare them to in terms of their price, and what's a high end or what's a low end, best case and worst case scenarios. So obviously the closest keeper we have in this situation is someone that's just moved to Watford, Maduka Okoye here. So he's sitting about the 381, so about 125 difference in price, right? Which is obviously quite substantial. But the key here is that Maduka Okoye is also not nailed. Being a brand new keeper to the league, it's tough to say whether he's going to get the first team gig. If you want my personal opinion, I think he will. But of course, you never really know until either the manager comes out and says what he's going to do, or you see it on the pitch firsthand. I think realistically, if everything went to plan, if he's a starting goalkeeper, I think the best comparison is of course Martin van der Voort, who plays for Genk. He's 20 years old, really high prospect for a goalkeeper, and he's sitting about the kind of £500 range, if not a little bit more. So the reason why they're so similar is that obviously similar ages in quite dominant teams in the league that have a lot of games. I would, class him in kind of similar realms where an extra year utility is also great, but I think Van der Voort would have European football chances. So balancing act, I would say they're about on the same page, and this is how I'd be building kind of my evaluation in terms of financials. So here you can see that the floor is about 269. I reckon you get it for about 255. Looking at the market here, you can see there's a couple of new auctions which will obviously bring the price down slightly. And someone like this selling for 269, it's a very small discount. If he is actually looking to sell, most people would accept that. So I think across time, getting him for £255 is pretty realistic. And then of course you have your upside. So like I was talking about Martin van der Voort, I think I took off a little bit off him just for the sake that Van der Voort's guaranteed for the next couple of years. He's probably slightly better as a goalkeeper at this moment because we've seen him play, how much he's already done for Genk last season. And then, of course, the downside, he goes back to being the Anderlecht bench. And how did I price that? Well, simply, I just took what the price was beforehand because that's kind of the realm he was expecting. There was a time period, actually, a little bit further back where I picked him up, where he had this little rise, where he looked like he could be the starting goalkeeper for Anderlecht. Once that had died down, there was no rumours for him. It looked like it was, dire straits. He's just going to stay on the bench for another year. That was about where the price I got. So I think that's a fair price. So the next part is obviously the most controversial part. Trying to put a percentage point on some of these is so hard to do. So of course, this evaluation all remains around the fact about will he move to Burnley. So to put a percentage on that is obviously darn near impossible. This is going to be my evaluation. So this is what I'm thinking. So for me, it's 85%. It seems to be reported everywhere. It makes sense in terms of the team. It makes sense in terms of the manager. If he's not going to play for Anderlecht, they can cash in. 5 million euros for a 19-year-old is a great buy. Is a great selling opportunity, obviously, for Anderlecht, and of course there'll be like resell on clauses where they'll get stuff back over time, so it really wouldn't impact them too financially. And then also the starting goalkeeper position. So very hard to say unless you are the manager, but on this perspective, I'm looking at the fact the manager likes him. Yes, it's a massive step up from not even playing in for Anderlecht to trying to play in the Championship. But of course, he's seen him in training. He's had these opportunities. He knows what he's going to be like. And then we've got to look at what's the current situation for Burnley, right? Looking on their website, they've got 3 goalkeepers, and you'd probably say, well, Wayne Hennessy's far more likely to play, but he's actually just moved to Nottingham Forest. And then you're looking at, Bailey, Peacock, Farrell here, and it's like, okay, well, last year he was loaned out on a League One side. Sheffield Wednesday finished all right. They finished, 4th, but they did let in a sizable amount of goals. So is that someone you'd really look to make the Championship step up for a team that's obviously looking to get back to the Premier League? That doesn't really make sense to me. If I was in their position, you're obviously looking for, a top-end Championship goalkeeper or a low-end Premier League goalkeeper. And then the other one we have is Will Norris. So he's a very difficult situation where he wasn't even getting in the squad a lot of the time last year, but he has played twice in the Premier League. He played a little bit for Ipswich as well, in 2020, which is obviously quite far back. So he's a bit of an unknown, and this is why I put, such a high percentage starting for Bart Verbruggen. And basically what that puts him at is an expected value of £270, which is just above the expected price, so £20. So for me, he would be a buy, but a very, very narrow buy. And of course, this is only for galleries that can afford to have him not play. For most people, you should be looking for a starting percentage of 95 to 100% for a goalkeeper, because obviously it's such a big investment. You'd need a gallery the size of mine, or maybe even just slightly smaller, where it's like, okay, well, if he doesn't start, it really doesn't bother me. I can sit on him for the other year because I've got, plenty of other goalkeepers that can fill in his position. So yes, it's a buy for me. It might not be a buy for you, and of course that margin is very small. The difference between 255 over 270, it is minimal. But then of course you can make your own expectations. So if you were to push it up to 75, you're pushing onto the realms, and of course this is only an expected value. In the event that a 60% likelihood does hit, or even if we were to knock it down to a 50% likelihood of moving and then starting for Burnley, you would then have your Martin van der Voort locked in at kind of 530, sorry, the 530 region. You wouldn't get your expected value, but that's up to you. So I'm going with a buy on Bart. Let me know what you think of that in the comments below. So just to conclude, for Bart Verbruggen, for me, it's just a narrow buy. I do have one of Bart Verbruggen's cards, so I will be holding on to it. This evaluation was basically my evaluation on whether I'll be buying or selling him. For me, it's going to be a buy. I like the long-term prospects of the kid, and then the fact he's going to get what looks like a strong chance for Burnley. If he, starts performing there, his price will just, absolutely skyrocket. And I've done my expected value, so that's basically where I'm leaning on this one. But alternatively, let me know what you think in the comments below. I feel like I'd probably be on the minority of this one. I can just from general sentiment of the market. But if you liked the series, please give it a like, because obviously it's something brand new, and let me know in the comments. And yeah, all the best, G. Cheers.